With Rob and Andrew. We're back again tonight, 2 nights in a row. It was good to see some of our familiar listeners last night, and it's definitely good to be seen, so it's nice to be back. Of course, you can find us still on America Out Loud, Monday through Friday at 9 Eastern, 8 Central, 6 on the West Coast, or you can find our full archive of shows at americaoutloud.com. But we're happy to be live here tonight. We're going to be joined by guest Heather Robinson, who's going to be joining us. And I'm only going to be around for the next 20 minutes or so, and then Heather and Rob will probably finish things up. Hello, Heather. It's good to see
Hello.
you.
Great to see you guys.
Indeed. So we've got a lot to talk about in our brief time with you guys tonight. And the first thing I want to talk about is this money that Joe Biden and the Democrats want to send to Ukraine, over $40 billion to Ukraine. At the same time, our southern border is unprotected. When President Trump tried to get the funding for the border wall, you all remember the Democrats nickel and dimed him on every little bit of money, acting like they could only give him $2 billion to protect our own border. And now you have the Democrats justifying sending over $40 billion to Ukraine. Someone that's really been calling this out is Rep. Paul Gosser on Twitter. I recommend people go check out his Twitter feed because he's one of the few Republicans who's speaking out against this, along with Rand Paul and a few others. But Heather, first, what are your thoughts on wanting to send Ukraine over $40 billion in addition to what we've already sent them in this, what seems to be never-ending war?
Yeah. I understand the grand total is 53 billion so far. Rob and Andrew, and hello, good evening to you both. I think you guys know I don't agree with the policy. I really think that where should I begin? I think that there's certainly a place for humanitarianism, for helping people be resettled who want to get out of harm's way. I don't personally, and I know a lot of people disagree with me, including people very close to me who I admire and respect. I don't believe we should be sending any weapons there. I don't believe we should be escalating this conflict. I don't think it's our fight. I know it's very complicated and you can make a lot of argues back and forth, but I personally believe that Americans are getting propagandized to about this situation. I don't agree with what Putin did, but I also think that there are elements of this situation that are civil war. There's a lot of history between Russia and Ukraine that most of us don't even begin to understand. And I think there's a larger agenda here on the part of the globalists. I think that this NATO agenda has been aggressively pushed, and I'm not convinced it's in the interest of the average American person at all. I wish the Ukrainians, those of them who are sincere about wanting democracy and freedom, I wish them luck. But I do not think that their war is our war. And I think that we have a lot of pressing problems here. Everything from mentally ill people untreated in our streets to a border that's out of control, drugs and criminal gangs streaming across it, human trafficking being migrated into the country. We have runaway inflation. We have, take your pick. I mean, so many pressing social issues, economic issues of, lack of mental health care in this country. And maybe if our country was doing phenomenally and we had a robust economy and peaceful, safe cities and an excellent healthcare system, including mental health care, then maybe I'd be like, you know what? Let's give a few billion, to strictly even then to humanitarianism, in Ukraine. But I really think that this is, I do think that, other than humanitarian aid, I really don't know what we're doing sending $53 billion over there. And we need, we don't even have baby formula here for everybody who needs it. So let's get real, folks.
Yeah. Well, I want to say hello to everyone tonight. Glad you guys could tune in. As always, please share the broadcast. My thoughts on this, the 40 billion or 53 billion, is what the heck are they doing with the money? There's no accountability. We're just writing a check, sending it to them. For all we know, Zelensky, who's I admire for what he's done so far in trying to keep his country out of the hands of Russia. But let's just face it, the country is completely. Oh, my mic is staticky again. I don't know what's happening here, but I hope you guys can hear me somewhat. But the country has completely been decimated by Russia. And my question is again, where is the money going? If you remember earlier on, they were telling us that they needed airplanes so that they could shoot down Russia planes and to protect their country. Well, the country has just been decimated. We're giving you javelins. What's left of the country? What else is there to take over? And I know we've all seen the pictures of Joe Biden going there speaking with the First Lady of Ukraine. We've also seen Nancy Pelosi, she's been there. We've seen Mitch McConnell, he's been there with his entourage. I don't know where they're going, but what's left of the country? Why do they need $40 billion? Is this to rebuild the country? Now, we all know that the other day that I'm just being facetious here. We all know that the other day NBC released a report saying that America has been supplying the Ukrainians with intelligence so that they can attack Russia troops or guards or whatnot, machinery.
Sink ships.
Right. No, that information should not have been released. We all know that it was happening. Okay. Yeah. Let's not fool ourselves. And although Putin had said, you better not send any troops here, you can't cross our borders to do it, or else it will be nuclear war, we know that it was happening. But for NBC to release this top secret information so that the Russians can have a conniptia and then draw us further into it, it begs the question, why would NBC release it? We know that it was happening. I mean, we see it. We're not dumb. But why would they release it? Are they trying to get Are they trying to get ahead of their competition, and that's the reason why?
Yeah, but okay, just going to be the devil's advocate for a second here, Rob. I hear you; it's scary, but on the other hand, I mean, the function of the press is to inform the people in large measure about what's going on in a country and what the government is doing. We're not supposed to have a top secret government in a republic like this, and I think Americans do have the right to know if our elites, our elected officials, and maybe our non-elected officials, people in the State Department, people, the permanent bureaucracy in DC, whoever it is who's, contributing to these decisions, I admit I have a strong opinion here, as you guys know, but I think ultimately the government's accountable to the people. It needs to, I don't know what all the legalities are of declaring war, but I think that we're supposed to vote on this. I mean, I don't think we're supposed to be flirting with World War III with the people having no knowledge of what's going on.
So Heather, if I'm understanding you correctly, you're saying that it is the responsibility of the media, as laid out in the Constitution, to keep our elected officials honest, to supply this information to the American people so that we can know what's happening. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm saying it's a function of the free press, right? I mean, look. They shouldn't be able to secretly take us to World War III before people have a chance to vote on whether we even want to risk that for Ukraine. I mean, if they're sinking ships, what I mean?
We should know. Absolutely. Now, okay, so just bear with me. So what the press did, it's part of their function to let the American people know. So I wonder why they wouldn't let the American people know that there was no Russia collusion, that Hunter Biden's laptop was in fact the truth, and that Joe Biden, there are some deficits there when it comes to his cognitive ability. Why won't they do the same thing there? Because that's equally as important as them telling us what our army is doing with giving them information, giving the Ukrainians information. Why is it that they're so selective in releasing this information, I wonder? And I'm just playing the devil's advocate. Because I know the answer, of course. I know the answer, just being a bit facetious. But why wouldn't they do the same thing, apply the same standards? That if you're going to tell us that, hey, by the way, this is what the U.S. is doing so that we can knock out the Russian ships, why don't you tell us that the 4 years you spent on talking about Russia collusion, it was a hoax, it was a lie, and that the Hunter Biden laptop is in fact truthful, and that you guys tried to suppress that information, and that also Joe Biden is struggling cognitively. Why won't they also? Because to me, in my humble opinion, that's equally important, if not more important. What would you guys say?
You want to take that one, Andrew?
Yeah, I would just say you guys are spot on what you're saying. I agree with Heather on the Ukraine situation for sure.
Yeah.
And the media releasing all this information, it just seems like their one goal is to keep trying to stir the pot a lot of times. And you see this with their push towards their negativity towards Vladimir Putin. I mean, you look at this for the last several years, anytime that the election was brought up in 2016, Democrats would blame Russia. Some of these things that they've been saying about Russia for the past several years, you better believe, has had long lasting hard feelings from Russia and the Russian people. There's no way that it wouldn't. So that's pretty much
Yes.
where I stand on it. It just seems like the media is trying to stir the pot to keep this war going as much as possible. I think Joe Biden and the Democrats want to keep this tension with Russia rising high up until the elections because they want to use it to blame for all of Joe Biden's bad things that he's had happen in his regime, the gas prices, the inflation, and everything else. They want to blame Russia instead of taking accountability for themselves.
That's such an interesting analysis, Andrew. And I sometimes feel like I'm really an outlier. So, I mean, I'm gratified to hear, not just because you happen to agree with me, but I really feel sometimes like, am I crazy? I mean, I care about people and human rights, but I feel like there's a lack of perspective in the viewing of this situation with Ukraine. I know that people are outraged to see a sovereign nation marched into. I do understand that people of goodwill have terrible distress about that, and it is very sad and barbaric. But there is a bigger picture. I think, for instance, it's funny because I hear myself sometimes feeling like a little bit like a liberal from the in the past, and now I've experienced some shift in consciousness, as we've come through these past 2 decades, of war in Iraq and Afghanistan, idealistic wars that I think were in a lot of ways fought with good intentions. Our troops did everything we asked them to do. They struggled to bring democracy to these hostile, chaotic regions. And I don't think really anybody could argue these were successful endeavors ultimately, despite the courage of our troops. And, now here we have a situation which, as you just wrote, Andrew, I mean, this is nothing against the Ukrainian people, many of whom I know are brave and have their safety and their hearts on the line. But their country was not a full-fledged functioning democracy when they started. Zelensky had jailed journalists. They were moving toward, I guess, some kind of a democratic model, but there was tremendous corruption there, tremendous problems there. There's an ongoing war there that's been going on for at least 15 years in the Donbass region, in which both sides have engaged in tremendous brutality. None of this information is known to most of the American people. At one point, the Russian language was outlawed, the speaking of Russian. My point is only that I think we have stumbled into a situation that has the markings of a civil war. Okay. I think there's also the larger NATO situation, which I never, I'm sorry. I really don't understand why it was absolutely vital that Ukraine be in NATO. And if it was that vital and absolute red line for us, I don't know why we didn't just do it and, make them part of NATO. I think what we did is we held out the carrot to them. We antagonized Russia. When I say we, I mean our foreign policy, our leadership. I don't see how anyone can argue that this wasn't bungled, which isn't to say that Putin doesn't bear responsibility for his decision to do this, but how anyone can, say that this was good statecraft on the part of America, I don't know. And I'm angry. I'm angry about it as an American. I feel like our leaders should know better. It's to use a simple analogy, you don't provoke a bully if you're not prepared to really back up the little guy and fight. You don't, I mean, this to me was a lack of common sense. There was a hubris to this. Putin said many, many times this was a red line for him. We would not give him the assurance. We would not stop pushing this NATO thing, which I think was very passive aggressive on America's part. And now, I think, at the very least, it was bungled, and now, now we're in a conflict with a nuclear power on the other side of the world, and it really wasn't necessary. But regardless of the past, I think right now, I think the worst thing to do would be to escalate this. We tried it in Iraq, we tried it in Afghanistan. Frankly, I don't really know how many more times we need to get the same lesson over and over again. That some of the world, sadly, is not ready for our democracy. And, I think that there's only so much blood and treasure America can, keep naively, dumping into regions of the world where it isn't really wanted or appreciated. And I think we need to make America great again and, invest in our country, in our borders, our health care, our people, our economy. You know who I think, had the better idea overall, and this country drove him out on a rail. So, I'm really frustrated right now with our leadership. And I think we need to, wish the Ukrainians luck, pull back and focus on our own country.
I agree. And the 40 billion or 53 billion or so that they're planning on trying to send to Ukraine, they should send it here to America. They should send it to our borders. We need to protect our borders, not the borders of Ukraine. We have a crisis at the border. And then now we find out the other day that the baby formula that's missing in action has popped up at the border. Why the border? Why aren't we feeding our babies? Why aren't we making certain that our babies have that formula? Not that we don't want those at our borders that are coming in, invading our borders to have formula, but what about our children? And I said this the other night during one of our tapings. Somewhere in America, a child's life was spared. A mother decided to have her baby. Somewhere in America, a baby is going hungry because there isn't enough formula to feed the child. Somewhere in America, a baby is being aborted because the left doesn't want to protect it. They see the baby as a para, keeping women from fulfilling their fullest potential. But who's going to make certain that the babies reach its fullest potential? Unfortunately, that's where we are here in America. The most unprotected and innocent amongst us have been thrown into a controversy because of the left. In the most richest country, in the most advanced country in the world, yet a baby's life is seemingly worthless. That's where we are here in America. And it's sad to say. Who's going to stop it? Who's going to stand up for these children? Who's going to stand up and say, this isn't right? We have to stop this.
I think with a lot of issues, if people valued children highest, Rob, if people were very serious about prioritizing the rights of children, whether we're talking about defund the police, whether we're talking about transgender rights, whether we're talking about, this formula situation. I mean, I just over and over again, I hate to say it, but I see a lot of adults, passionate about themselves and their causes for themselves, and I get it. We all care about ourselves. Let's get reals, maybe ourselves are our first priorities, many of us. But I am really fed up, though. I mean, I think at a certain point, yes, even your own rights, whoever you are, I mean, I think if your own rights are so all important that even if there are disastrous consequences, indirectly to children because of your extreme preoccupation with your own rights, whether it's defund the police so that no man ever feels threatened by the police to the extreme so that you have, right, grown men shouldn't walk around in their own country feeling threatened by the police for no reason. I agree with that. They shouldn't have to be scared. But you know what? neither should any of us have to be scared of rampant crime in our cities, including, and children shouldn't be caught in the crossfire. Yes, transgender individuals should be given respect and full rights, but if it's taken to such an extreme that this very rare problem is inculcated and discussed with little kids to the point that masses of little kids are confused by it, at a certain point, the rights of select adults can't be allowed to override the rights of the majority, including the innocent children of this country. It's like with these issues, or the abortion right. Yes, there should be basic right if God forbid something's wrong and, a woman's raped, this and that. But I mean, you can't take it to such an extreme that you're getting an abortion in the second or third trimester for no reason. I mean, these kinds of things, it's all about rights. And yes, we honor individual liberties, but liberty of certain select individuals can't be so all and totally important over any other priority that the children of this country are the casualties. And I see this happening a lot.
Like you said, we see it happening a lot, and then it makes you wonder, like I said, who's going to stand up for these poor kids? Mm-hmm. And who's going to make these mothers, as opposed to telling these mothers that it's nothing but a big sale, don't worry about it. This is the richest country in the world, and when we don't have formulas to feed our babies, and then we're told, oh, and don't try any home remedies because that won't work, you could end up harming your baby. Now, the Biden administration said that they were aware that this problem was coming. Well, if you were aware of it, what were you doing to prevent it? Or what were you doing? What were you going to offer as a solution? As opposed to, we now find out, well, we're going to give $40 billion to Ukrainians, and Americans, they're going to sit here and they're going to suffer. Or we have formulas at the border. I mean, if people don't wake up and see that this administration, unfortunately, does not care about them, nothing will wake them up. You can hate Donald Trump all you want to. I get it. He was bombastic. He was loud. He was in your face. He tweeted a lot. But if you're going to allow that to keep you from waking up and realizing that the man who's sitting in the White House right now is cognitively challenged, doesn't have a clue, so it seems, as to what's happening, what's going on, and the mistakes that he's made nonstop and continues to make them. Even people on the left have said that if Trump were president, Putin would have never gone into Ukraine. If Trump were president, we wouldn't have high inflation that you guys were saying, oh, it's just transitory. It is not transitory. If Trump were president, we wouldn't have a supply chain problem. If Trump was president, our borders wouldn't be bursting at the seams. If Trump was president, babies or parents wouldn't be wondering, where are we going to get our next formula? But he's not president. Biden is. And Biden had promised to unite us. And he has done everything except unite us. He's coming out the other day talking about the ultra MAGA group and how they don't like America. What do you mean they don't like America? They want to build America, make America great again. Well, you're making it worse. You're creating a problem. So what is he talking about? The ultra, and that's part of the narrative. They blame Putin for everything. When it's not Putin, they want to blame Trump because they know those are triggers for their base. But I hope their base is waking up and saying, no, Biden, this is all on you.
We're just asking some questions about this. Like, one irony I do want to note, Rob, is, we've been told for however many years now that we should all be terrified of white supremacy here in America. And I'm not saying there's no problem with that. Okay. I would never dismiss it. I know I'm Jewish myself. There are these nuts out there. But, I think we're talking about a true fringe in terms of anybody who would actually take action. Meanwhile, it should be honestly acknowledged that there's a battalion of the Ukrainian military called the Azov Battalion, which is known, and there have been many articles about this for years before this current war and crisis and our American involvement. For years, it's been documented that there are thousands of very ardent and real, serious white supremacist individuals there in Ukraine who view themselves as heirs to what the Nazis did in Ukraine, 70 years ago. I'm not saying, that it's a significant minority. You're talking about 2.5% of the population, okay? But it is not 0.001% of the population, and they have been welcomed into the Ukrainian military. They wear the swastika. They've named public streets and monuments for themselves in Ukraine. I mean, this is, I get shouted down on Twitter when I mention this, that I'm slandering the Ukrainian cause. I'm not saying it's the majority, okay? I'm not saying that's what most of the Ukrainians are fighting for. I'm just saying that, if we're going to be concerned about white supremacy and we're serious about it, you don't get to be selective and obsess and terrify people about the 0.001% of Americans who are white supremacists while you give $53 billion to a foreign military that has incorporated an official white supremacist brigade into its fighting force. We are funding these people. And when the dust settles, okay, I'm not saying it's the majority over there, but it is not, you're not talking about 5 or 10 or 100 people. You're talking about thousands of committed, hardened fighters who, ascribe to a violent white supremacist ideology. And those are among the people we are sending weapons. We are sending American tax dollars right now. And Biden is supposed to be so concerned about white supremacy from from Trump supporters. I don't think there was a single Trump supporter who harmed a minority in the name of Donald Trump in 4 years, but we were told, at every opportunity that this was a real problem and MAGA people are racist and they hate us and they're coming and this and that. But nobody's pointing out that, this is just a tool of the left. I mean, if they were really so concerned about, the growth of white supremacy around the world, why are we sending weapons into a conflict, where we cannot have any control over, how things will be when the dust settles. We don't know what kind of place these people will have in Ukraine's government if Ukraine prevails. So, it's another reason I think that we Americans should be asking more questions about this.
Absolutely. We should be asking more questions about it. And then just speaking of white supremacies, as you were saying, you look at the other day, this past weekend, whereby there was a shooting in Buffalo, New York.
Yeah.
And people are wondering what happened. This 18-year-old kid by the name of, what is the guy's name? I have it here, which it's beyond my, Peyton Gendron, 18 years old. Now, a lot of people are surprised or shocked that this has happened. But as I said on Saturday night, when Andrew and I went live, we were talking about it, I'm not at all surprised. And I'll tell you why. This pressure cooker has been cooking for quite some time. And you think about it. When you're going to demonize a group of people and tell them that they're bad, they're inherently bad, because of what they did or what their ancestors did decades ago, centuries ago. And it's just a steady diet of telling them in our school systems, on our jobs, well, we're not going to hire you because you're not the right color, you're not the right gender. And you're taking food from a family, you're harming a family who would have ordinarily said, hey, we love everybody. But then when you start taking food from that family or taking away their livelihood, and you're telling them that they're bad, at some point, they're going to crack. I'm not trying to make an excuse for what this young man did because it's wrong, the same way it was wrong for what Darrell Brooks did in Wisconsin and Frank James did in the subway of New York City. Now, no one wants to talk about that. They want to just brush it up under the rug because it's not the narrative that right now the media wants to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Just earlier today in Laguna Beach, California, there was a shooting.
Yeah.
Now, we're talking about it, but look at how quick we were able to identify Peyton Gendron, and we were able to identify and say that he was a white supremacist and that he will be charged with a hate crime and possibly domestic terrorism. Now, you look back a couple of months ago at Frank James. We couldn't even find out what his name was. We couldn't even decide once we found out his name if he was going to be charged with a hate crime. Look at Darrell Brooks, the exact same thing. Why is that? So back to my story. Peyton Gendron. I am not surprised. But what I am fearful of is that if we don't tone down the rhetoric that's up on the hill, demonizing certain groups of people because of past indiscretion of their ancestors, more of this is going to happen. It's wrong no matter what. It's wrong when Darrell Brooks did it. It was wrong when Frank James did it. And it is wrong today that Peyton Gendron has done it. But we have got to tone down the rhetoric, because trying to make things equal and fair and diversify, that's not the way to do it. By accusing a group of people and saying that you're rotten because of what your ancestors have done, people are going to push back. And we have to stop this. It has to be stopped, and we have to call it out across the board. But what will happen is that we will use this Peyton Gendron situation to put fear in the hearts of Black people and say, oh, they're coming after you. See that? The white supremacists, they're coming after you. They're going to kill you. They're killing you. Oh, you better be careful. Now, what you bet tomorrow and all of next week, that's all we will hear. We will hear that from now up until the election, that they're coming after you. And who's to blame? Oh, Donald Trump and white supremacists. But Donald Trump isn't in office. He doesn't even have a platform on Twitter to talk about this. Right. But who does have a platform? The left. Joy Reid, Al Sharpton, Don Lemon, Anderson Cooper. And the list goes on and on and on. But no one wants to call that out. They don't want to call them out. The Washington Post, New York Times. They don't want to call them out, that they're the ones who are feeding this hateful rhetoric into the minds of people. And they're pushing it, unaware that while they're pushing it, they're causing more harm than good. Because you will have people out there looking at this and saying, no, this is not fair. Look at what's happening to us. We've got to push back because they're going to take over. And that's all they're thinking, that they're going to take over. When in actuality, that's not happening at all. So all the while, the left and Biden's administration, they are seemingly saying, well, we're helping Black people. No, you're causing more harm, not only to Black people, but to white people, to the country as a whole. Pull back the rhetoric. Put a pause on it. Speak the truth. You've got to stop this. It has to stop, because if it doesn't stop, it will continue. Meanwhile, in Chicago, just this weekend, look at the deaths that took place there. Black on Black crime. No one says anything about it. Look at the innocent children whom were killed. No one says anything about it. Look at New York City. On a constant daily basis, people are being pushed in front of a subway. People are being attacked. Feces is being smeared on them. People are being attacked with knives. Who are the culprits? Black people, Black men. But we can't say that. Now, that's not to say that white people aren't culprits also. But we have got to look at this evil and call it evil no matter where, no matter who did it. It's still evil. Plain and simple, Heather.
I hear you, Rob, and, bless you. I mean, I think, our humanity, everything, every great spirit has taught us, from Martin Luther King to Gandhi to our founding fathers, the idea that we are created equal under God, we are worthy of respect as humans. This isn't about superficial skin color, hair color. It's ridiculous. I just feel that, listen, let them call me a simpleton, but I still say what matters is our common humanity and our, individual respect for each other as humans. And, white people should be good to Black people should be good to white people, men should be good to women should be good to men. This isn't, this identity politics is like going back to grade school, in the most unenlightened schoolyard, with a bunch of bratty kids, making petty distinctions and bullying each other over them. As far as I'm concerned, it's a huge step backward, and have we not learned a thing? I mean,
it makes you wonder, have we not learned? We have made so much, we've made a lot of progress in this country.
Yeah.
At the same time, we're taking a step back. Who would ever think that in 2022 we would be pushing segregation? And it's a new form of segregation. People would deny it, But in essence, that's what's happening when we're saying, well, no, black people need to have their own space because they become triggered when they're around white people and they feel uncomfortable, they feel threatened. What type of hogwash is that? Because white people can say the same thing about black people. And then you would say, oh no, that's racism. It doesn't matter who says it, it's racism across the board. We cannot build up one by tearing down another. And then we want to talk diversity. Everyone should be given an equal chance no matter what. And you know what, Heather, I was thinking the other day, I'm like, because we're trying to make certain that so many people get jobs and whatnot and build these different numbers, why is it that when we're interviewing, why don't we just say, send in your resume? I don't even like resumes, but send in your resume, a nameless resume, just say candidate A, candidate B. We don't want to see you. We'll do the interview on Skype or Zoom or what have you, and speak to the person that way. And then decide based upon what you hear and the skill set, who gets the job. The person shows up on the job. We don't know if the person's black, white, green, purple, or whatnot. We just know that the best candidate got the job, plain and simple. And we can even go as far as to disguise the voice so that we don't know if it's a male or female. But the way we're doing it right now, trying to be selective, that no, we need so many blacks, we need so many whites, we need so many Indians, we need so many Asians, we need so many males, we need so many females, we need so many transgenders. It's crazy. So if we were to get rid of all that and just say, okay, nameless, faceless, voiceless, let's have a conversation, send me your resume, we'll look at it, and then we'll make the decision. But as I said, I don't even like the resumes. Because resumes tell me absolutely nothing. It just tells me, okay, you went to college, you worked here, you worked there. Whether or not you're lying, who knows? Because I can't get in contact with your company and ask you. They'll just say, yeah, they worked here. That's it. But that's just, to me, that's one way of trying to get rid of all this, division in society that is definitely setting us up to fall. So now we're coming up on, the closed period. We're not going to stay on long, but Heather, I wanted you to share with our listeners and viewers the new piece that you're working on for the New York Post.
Sure. Well, I'm working on one piece, Robin. I actually had another piece come out today.
Okay.
Today was about the primary, especially the Pennsylvania primary. It's yes. There's there's a House seat up in District 12 in Pennsylvania, which is Pittsburgh, and its environs, and it's Summer Lee and a moderate sort of Democrat named Steve Irwin going head to head. And so it was a piece about moderate Democrats, trying to prevent Summer Lee from getting elected. She's, thought to be a real rising star in the Democratic Party, but she's been endorsed by the Squad and by Bernie Sanders. And she's thought to be very radical, and she's tweeted a lot of very radical things, and she's very anti-Israel, or so it would seem. She's a hard leftist. So a lot of people in these parts were concerned, and they, some of them have crossed party lines to register as Democrats, because you can do that. Pennsylvania has an open primary, in order to vote for the other candidate, Steve Irwin. But I think the larger issue is one of fighting, competition between moderate Democrats, whoever still exists, who's a moderate Democrat, and the hard left, and the battle for the soul of their party, which continues. And then I'm also working on a piece about Los Angeles, about follow home robberies there, because things are out of control in LA. There are gangs who are alerting each other when they see someone who's wearing an expensive watch or getting out of a fancy car or leaving an upscale club or restaurant. And the gangs essentially communicate with each other and swarm the person, often beat them, sometimes jump them.
Yeah, I heard about that. Yeah.
Yeah, even before they have a chance to give them, whatever it is the gangs are after sometimes. And so it's another example of crime escalating in this atmosphere of essentially what the police captain I spoke with was complaining about was what they call it enhancements. There are laws that allow prosecutors to prosecute people who are party to a crime. It allows them to to be more aggressive in policing gangs, because it's like anyone who's there can be held accountable if they're party to the crime. But now the laws are so liberal in Los Angeles that anyone, unless they're literally the person who pulled the trigger, they have to be released. And, enhancements are not allowed as part of the prosecution. So a lot of gang members are getting out with a slap on the wrist. And it's a very, very, just a very, what's the word, loosey goosey environment for for criminals to have a heyday. And sure enough, in the atmosphere of defund the police, gang violence has just precipitously risen in recent months. So
yeah, it's really unfortunate. I mean, you see that here in New York City, the crime rate. I think just earlier today there was a shooting in one of the subways. No one was killed, thankfully, or hit. But it does beg the question: what are our elected officials, the Democrats, are doing? Mm-hmm. They had said defund the police. They defunded the police, and look at what's happened. It's like a complete wild west. And one of the things that I always look at is that you have people. You look at Chicago. Mayor Lori Lightfoot, who had promised she was going to go in and clean house, but she's done nothing. She's done everything but that. Seems as though the crime has increased. And Barack Obama is from Chicago. You would think he would go there and try and clean it up or do something, but it has not happened. Now, the moment someone from the right would go in and try to do it, they would start attacking the person. And I had always said when Trump was in office, I'm like, he should go to Chicago. Now, I know the mayor said, we don't want you here, you're not welcome. But I always said he should go there and say, hey, this has got to stop. The shooting and the violence. New York City was the same way. And Giuliani came in and he cleaned it up. Bloomberg came in and he kept it going. But then de Blasio came in with his radical communist ideas, and look at where we are. And you have to look at it. I mean, because we had decades of tranquility and peace and a safe big city. New York City was a safe city. How is it that de Blasio was able to come in and destroy all of that, and some of you will continue to vote for Democrats? Look at Eric Adams. No, I realize he's only been on the job for a short period of time, but my gosh, I mean, and Hochul, Governor Hochul, you would think she would fire Alvin Bragg. I mean, the police chief, Kensha Sewell, she's even said, we can't sustain this, not putting criminals in jail. You look at Gascon in California, he's not putting them in jail. It's like, oh, give him a slap on the wrist because they didn't shoot the person. They didn't kill him, so let's let him back out there. But they're committing more crimes. And if there isn't a penalty, of course, criminals are going to keep doing it. I can't believe New York City, my beloved New York City, has just become the city that it has become because of the crime. And people will say, oh, well, it's not that bad. No, it's bad. It's really bad. And it shouldn't be that way.
No,
it should not. And New York, it can be managed. Giuliani's show has shown us this.
Yeah.
We just need the right leaders, Heather, plain and simple.
We do. And, it's such a helpless feeling to see how the media has just rewritten history. I mean, it's been a tumultuous few years, and granted, a lot of things have happened that were upsetting, but I think that the demonizing of Rudy Giuliani and the trashing of him and his legacy, this whole politics of personal destruction, that the media and the left have wrought, wasn't enough to oppose Trump's policies. Most of the people who hated Trump really didn't study the issues or understand his policies.
No.
It was all about hatred, whipping up this cult of resentment and against him and his personality and anyone associated with him. And so here you have, a very fine, leader, Giuliani, who, I mean, how anyone could dispute. I'm not saying the man was perfect. He wasn't a god. Maybe there were some things that he did that were, in hindsight, maybe a little excessive or not necessary anymore, whatever. But I mean, how anyone could dispute his leadership in turning around New York and leading the country through 9/11. That's just a person who really is just in denial of certain basic truths and
Right.
this, but we have a rewriting of things. And it's yes, it's like all that hard work and all that progress. It's just a shame to see it being eroded. And I don't know. I hear you. I mean, I really don't know how anybody can look at this
Hmm.
and vote for it. I
Right.
mean, just the first victims are mostly minorities. Terrible, terrible. Losses in the cities across this country, and all the good that was supposed to have come from Black Lives Matter, the increased awareness and consciousness of the preciousness of every life, which I'm all for. But I mean, let's look at the reality. I mean, how many people's lives have been lost now, starting with Black people, because the cities have become chaos. The gangs are in control in a city like LA. The children getting caught in the crossfire worse than ever
Hmm.
in Chicago. Does anybody really care about life, or was that just a slogan? I mean,
Right.
the yes, police brutality is an issue and it's important, but there are other issues. I mean, it gets back to the whole issue of children. If we really care most about our children, and it's not just about ourselves, whoever we are, whether we're
Hmm.
black, white, men, women, I mean, we all are pretty lucky to be Americans and to have grown up and gotten to be our grown fool selves, frankly. You know what I mean? It's like we're all,
Hmm.
if it was that abysmal, we wouldn't have become grown ass people. So, like, how
Right.
about a few minutes of consideration for the children of this country?
Right.
What we can all do to just not think about ourselves and our rights and our complaints for 5 minutes and think about maybe some of the unintended consequences of what we have pushed, and is this really improving things for the children of this
Yeah.
country?
Yeah.
Let's think a little bit about that.
I agree. It does beg the question, and I hope. I mean, there's always hope, and I
Hmm.
hope that eventually people will wake up and see that where we're headed is not where we want to be, and that in 2022 we get on the right track, we make the right decisions, and we have political leaders who are out there to serve the people and not serve themselves or make a name for themselves or not to pad their wallets. Because at the end of the day, it's about keeping America great again. It is not a racist comment. If you say that you're triggered because it's racist, then you don't like Bill Clinton, because Bill Clinton even spoke about making America great again. And that's what it's all about, making certain that America, the greatest country out there, the country that everyone wants to come to, and it's not because, oh, well, you think you're better than everyone else. No, because it is a land of opportunity. And when we were born here, when you were born in America, you hit the jackpot. Whether or not you want to accept it, you did. So,
I like that.
so thank you all for tuning in tonight. Thank you, Heather, for coming on with such
Yeah,
short notice. We
you're the
will
best.
start doing more of these because we hear that a lot of our listeners and viewers like to see us. They want to hear us. And as we always say, please share the broadcast. Please invite others to come on. And the more we have, hey, as they say, let's just have a big party. So thank you, Heather. Thank you all. Have a great night. Good night.
Good night.